Okay. It looks like, oh, it looks like we're live. All right. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for coming to our fourth coffee chat through the Arizona branch of the International Dyslexia Association. I'm Heather Cassiola. We have Beth Bovey here, who's also hosting, moderating, and we are so excited to welcome Kate Witt to our coffee chat. So Kate has been born and raised in Arizona. She's graduating from the University of Alabama in a couple weeks with the major or the degree in Communicative Disorders. She's graduating in the fall. After she graduates, she's going to go to ASU for her master's in Speech and Language Pathology. And Kate is an amazing young woman. She has been an advocate and a voice for students with dyslexia like herself, which came out of the necessity of trying to get basic accommodations. And it turned into a passion for Kate. Some of you might know this already if you know Kate, but she spoke on the Senate floor several times, I believe as a high schooler, advocating for screenings, advocating for teacher training. So we are so excited to welcome her this morning and to chat with her. And she's going to tell you about her journey and what she experienced and how she really overcame her challenges. So I hope you have your coffee cups ready to go. And we're just going to, we have a new platform, Hopin, which we're using for the symposium, our dyslexia symposium, which I hope you all will join us for the symposium in September. So I'm going to let Kate take it from here. And welcome, Kate. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I have my new cactus coffee cup. I'm very excited to come back to Arizona for graduate school. So like she said, my name's Kate Witt, born and raised in Phoenix. I love Arizona. I came out to Alabama for my undergrad. So if anyone's an Alabama fan, roll tide. I have to say that. And I'm very excited to come back to Arizona. I was diagnosed in 6th grade with double deficit dyslexia in phonological processing and reading comprehension. And this diagnosis didn't come easily, as one would think, being diagnosed all the way into 6th grade. It took a lot of years of my parents going back and forth with admin and teachers at my school and just trying to decide whether there was really an issue there or not, because I got such great grades, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I just want to start off with how I'm going to organize my presentation. I have just kind of a pre-diagnosis part and then an after-diagnosis part. That's kind of the easiest way to understand it. And a couple of goals for everyone that's here. If you are dyslexic or you have a learning disability, I really want you to walk out of here feeling confident in your abilities and being a dyslexic individual and knowing that you have so many talents, and it's not always about the disabilities and the deficits that are present. There's a lot of great things that come with being dyslexic. And if you're a parent or guardian feeling confident in your ability to see the signs of dyslexia, how to advocate for your child, how to advocate for yourself if maybe you find out later in life that you're dyslexic. And for the SLPs, educators, anyone else out there, I just want you to have a better understanding of the emotional side and journey of being dyslexic. And I just feel that that's very important in our field, in having an understanding of what the client is going through, especially while administering therapy. And just kind of start off, I want to set the scene of my childhood. I had a great childhood. I played every sport under the sun. I wasn't very good at most of them. I was a super outgoing kid. I was really loud. My parents are listening. They know I was just like the loud, outgoing child at every gathering. We went to Disneyland for my birthdays. I loved being a Disney princess. I played outside on the weekends in my neighborhood. We made lemonade stands, rode bikes, like just kind of a picture perfect childhood. But there were signs of my dyslexia kind of everywhere throughout my whole life, even not in school. Like when I was 3 to 4, I couldn't learn to pump myself on the swing. I loved swinging, but I just could not get that back and forth motion. And my parents had no idea. They just thought, oh, she needs, some extra practice. I was horrible at tying my shoes. I still to this day like bunny ear my shoes. Even this morning, bunny eared my shoes. I could never just get it down to do it the other way. And I didn't learn to ride my bike until I was about 11 or 12. And actually, the only reason I learned to ride my bike was because my brother was learning, who's 6 years younger than I am. And I just was like, no way is he going to know how to ride the bike before me. And I never could get my left and right down. Still, I do my L's driving. And these are all signs of dyslexia that were present. And my parents saw this. It was very obvious, but they just didn't know that that was dyslexia at the time. And looking into kind of my school journey earlier in my childhood, I like to call it just, I was invisibly struggling in a sense for a while. When I'm saying that, I mean, without a deeper look into my academics or an understanding of dyslexia, you wouldn't know that I was dyslexic. I received, for the majority, all A's throughout my entire grade school experience. But to myself, first and second grade, it became very evident that I had an issue with reading. I struggled immensely with my spelling tests. There was a little blue book in first grade, and we had spelling tests every week. And I just couldn't get it down. The way that they were teaching us to memorize the words, to spell them, I wasn't understanding it. And the way that I compensated for that was I would memorize the shape of the word. So the example that I like using is the word school. I'd memorize that it kind of looks like a school bus with the H is up, the L is up, the O's having a school bus shape. And that's how I saw it. And I just thought, you know what, I'm not very smart. Like, I've got to figure out these ways to work around and figure out these little knick-knack type things to perform at the level that my peers are performing. Another great example, AR reading, which is accelerated reading. I just never could reach the points that you needed. So for those that don't know what AR reading is, you have a grade average of the reading level of the book and how many points each book is worth, and you have to take a reading comprehension test to get the points in the system. And so I would spend this whole semester reading a grade level book. Harry Potter usually was what I attempted to read. And I would take this AR test, and I would miserably fail. And I was so angry with myself because I read the book, but I was not comprehending anything I was reading. So I'd go in to take this test, and it was just like taking a test blindly. And my librarian actually would keep the AR system open the day that all the points were due. And I would pick out kindergarten level books that were worth 0.5 points, and I needed like 10 for the semester. And I would read through 20 of them to get the points necessary to get the A in English. So when you look at my grades and I have all my AR points, there's nothing wrong. She's doing fine. But it was the added, like, me begging for the AR system to remain open, sitting in the library, stressing, sweating, reading these kindergarten books, trying to get those points in, all this background kind of noise going on of, oh yeah, there's an issue here, but you just couldn't really see it from just looking at my grades or just looking at me as a student. Another example that I really struggled with was popcorn reading, which is where you go through, each student reads part of the textbook, the book, whatever it is. And I would spend the entire class, if we're reading a textbook, I'd read through how many paragraphs were needed until we got to my paragraph. So I'd count, oh, there's 8 students ahead of me. I'm 8 paragraphs in. I'd go through and I would scan the paragraph and I'd circle the words I didn't know how to pronounce. And I'd whisper to people, how do I pronounce this? What is this word? And I'd figure it out and I'd practice it in my head. And, you know, by that time we get to me and I know the paragraph, but I have no idea what was read before me. I'm not really comprehending what I'm reading. I don't know the words that I'm reading. I've just memorized what people have told me, made little notes in pencil in the textbook, and then I'd erase it afterwards. So just another example of how I was compensating for everything in the background, but you just wouldn't notice. And if a teacher wasn't directly watching me, you wouldn't really notice that I was doing that. And I just, all of those examples just come down. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was going to just have to work this way my whole life. And and that I was never going to perform like my peers. And this really affected my self-esteem. And this is where the emotional journey kind of comes into play of there was no explanation as to why I was struggling this way. And all my peers were doing beautifully, reading and having their reading comprehension scores being so high and enjoying school. And I was just constantly anxious and stressed all the time. And so that really affected how I grew up and how I saw myself and how I perceived my success and my failure, especially in school. And so around this time in 6th grade, 5th grade, my parents started to notice that things were wrong. And there were always kind of some signs earlier in my life, but it never was anything big. And around 6th grade, we had vocabulary tests once a week. And the vocabulary words were pretty difficult. They start getting harder, a lot harder to spell once you're in that middle school section. And I would study for them, and my mom would quiz me. And I remember this example of I was in my room studying, working on these vocabulary tests. I remember the textbook was orange. Like, I remember exactly how it was laid out. And I went into the kitchen, my mom quizzed me, and I didn't know one word, like one word out of 20, just nothing, knew nothing. And my mom was very angry with me because she's like, you're not studying. I don't know what you're doing. You need to figure something out, like go back in, actually study, come back out, and we'll quiz again. And unknown to me, she came in while I was studying, saw that I was studying. And when I came back out, she quizzed me again, nothing, just, I didn't know anything. And that for her and how she explains it was just kind of like the ball is dropped. Like, I now seeing we have a major issue here because she's putting in the work. She's attempting to study for these vocabulary tests and learn these words, and nothing is holding on. And so I went to Kumon for reading. I went to a couple of different reading tutors, and no one really said anything. Everyone was like, oh, we can work on, the reading comprehension. We'll read through, do these packets. And that was kind of it. And it just came to the point where my mom met with the reading specialist of my elementary school and said, there's an issue. We have a problem. And brought all these AR tests that I had of just me 100%, 60%, 80%, 40%. It just nothing was, I was not excelling. I was not increasing my reading comprehension or these scores. And she sat down with the reading specialist, and the reading specialist said, well, we have a phonetic test that she can do. It's for 2nd graders. But is she willing to do it? And my mom, whether I was willing to do it or not was not a part of the question. My mom was going to make me do that test. So I take the test, and the reading specialist sat back down with her, and she said, please don't yell at me. And my mom was like, why am I going to yell? What do you mean? And she's like, just don't yell. My mom was like, why am I going to yell? What's going on? You have to tell me. And I just bombed this phonetic test made for 2nd graders in 6th grade. And the reading specialist said she doesn't have any phonetic knowledge. She doesn't know any phonics. And that, I think, was the scariest thing for my mom, because I'm paying for this education. We're now in the 6th grade. What do you mean there's no phonics? What am I supposed to do? And she ended up having me go to a neuropsychologist, and I was diagnosed. So we're in the 6th grade now. I'm diagnosed with double deficit dyslexia and phonological processing and reading comprehension. And the next step was the neuropsych person told my parents about Wellington Alexander Center in Scottsdale. And for those that don't know what Wellington Alexander Center is, it's a medically based, scientifically proven intervention program for reading disabilities and dyslexia. And it targets the root causes of that and not so much the symptoms. So targeting, your brain pathways and understanding how to recognize the phonemes, see that, and just retraining yourself how to read and spell, basically. And so my parents went to a meeting, and I did my own test within Wellington, and I scored in the 8th percentile for phonological processing. And at this point, my parents are sitting in this meeting in Wellington, And my mom thought I wasn't going to college, that I was going to live in our basement for the rest of my life, probably drop out of high school. And my dad thought the test was wrong. Like, no, nothing's wrong. Like, she's not dyslexic. She has all A's. What are you talking about? So just kind of two different reactions to this diagnosis. But there was no information that my parents had on dyslexia. I don't know what kind of reaction I would have if I didn't have an understanding as to what dyslexia was and someone told me that my child was dyslexic. So it was a very hard emotional process as well for my parents, just kind of understanding, no, she can be successful, we can do the work, we can do this therapy, like it will work out, instead of just, here's the diagnosis, your kid is probably going to fail in school. So my parents decided that I was going to go to Wellington Alexander Center in between my 7th and 8th grade year over the summer, because most of the time when you're younger and you get a younger diagnosis, you can go out for 9 weeks of school to do Wellington and you'll come back performing even better. So the 9 weeks really isn't an issue missing, because you've now learned these basic skills you need to be successful in the later grades of 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. But at this point, sitting in 7th grade, I couldn't leave school for 9 weeks out of the school year. You can't do that in these older grades. So I went during the summer, and it was very intensive. It was Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., retraining my brain how to read and process phonemes and process words, and just the process how I'm reading a paragraph, like very simple things that I was supposed to be learning the whole time in school, but I hadn't learned. So I had to make up a lot of time in this 8-week summer program. And they said, and we still tell clients now, like it's very intensive and you will be exhausted. And I was very exhausted throughout that whole summer. I've never felt my brain working as hard as it was during that summer. And I still remember like how it felt at the end of every day. And I remember the first day getting back in the car it must have been like in May in Wellington. And I got in the car and I just sobbed to my mom, because I was like, I'm relearning the alphabet. And for, a preteen 13-year-old girl who's self-conscious and has had anxiety and stress about school already because of all the past years, it was a very hard emotional journey to go through. I was very embarrassed to be doing that. And just, I was upset with myself. I didn't know if it was something that I did, or I still was thinking like, I'm just not smart. I don't know what to do. So that was a very rough time emotionally, but I was still putting in the work at Wellington, and it ended up being the best decision my parents have ever made for me. In 8th grade, I knew I wanted to go to a private high school, and I took the high school placement entrance exam. So this is about 6 months out from Wellington. I'm reading pretty well. I'm way above my grade level for reading. Like, I'm really starting to see the benefits from Wellington. And I ended up scoring in the 95th percentile for reading comprehension on the high school placement exam, which was a really big accomplishment. And I remember seeing the score and I was like, is this right? Like, I don't think this is right, but okay, I'll take it. So it became very clear that Wellington really kind of changed my trajectory for myself academically, and it ended up changing my career trajectory too, because that's now what I want to do. So I get to high school. I'm super excited to be there. It was a very competitive, prestigious high school in the Valley. But I knew walking in, I wasn't going to have the same guarantees like I would in a public school in terms of accommodation and just kind of treatment with my learning disability. And so I walked in, and the only accommodation I was offered was extra time on finals, which I'm a pretty fast test taker. I don't even use extra time now. That's not really what I need for my disability, but that there was not really an understanding as to different accommodations for different learning disabilities. And we had to take a foreign language. I ended up taking Latin my freshman year. And about halfway through the school year, our teacher had to leave for Latin, and we got a new teacher. And this was kind of where I began my self-advocacy journey, and I knew I wanted to start advocating for others because I approached this teacher on his first day. I just had kind of my speech down of, hey, I'm dyslexic. This is where I need some help and accommodations. This is kind of what you can expect of me in these certain situations. Just kind of explaining myself and my learning style. And he flat out told me to my face, dyslexia is not real. And I, as a 14-year-old who already is struggling to, it's a scary situation to approach an adult and say, I need you to give me these accommodations, because I'm 14, I'm young. That was not a great feeling when an adult told me, no, that doesn't exist. When anyone tells you any part of yourself is not real, it's not great. That doesn't do a lot for your emotional and just mental well-being. So that was very difficult. And my school, we fought vigorously for me to be able to hop out of Latin, because this teacher was not going to help me in any way. And foreign language was, other than English, the other thing that I really needed assistance with. So I was able to take sign language through Rio Salado Community College, but I had to add that as an 8th class. So we had 7 classes we had to take. And this is a rigorous high school. It's a lot of work. And the only way I could get out of Latin was taking on an 8th class at a community college and just filling that 7th period with another class, because that's the only thing they would allow me to do. So I got a C- that first semester, because I'm 14. I've never been in a college class, let alone an online college class. And I'm in this first year of a rigorous school taking 7 other classes with essentially no accommodations. So that's where I kind of just had to hone in, and I knew I was going to have to really fight for myself in high school to kind of make it out of this high school alive and being successful. And one of the things that I did, and my mom helped me with, was asking for accommodations in my English class. We read the Odyssey, and I wanted to record the lecture. I still use this technique now. I read what's needed for class. I sit in the class and I only listen to that lecture. And then I take notes re-listening to the lecture, because it's really difficult for me to be writing while listening to someone, especially the first time that the information is being presented. So I knew that would really benefit me. And we sat down to ask for this accommodation. And basically I was told, you can either move to remedial English or you can leave the school. And so just a few things wrong with that. One, you should just never be treating people that way. But the other thing was, I realized in that situation that the administration's understanding of dyslexia was that it was an intellectual issue and that I wasn't intelligent. And so I kind of knew there, I'm like, they just don't even understand the basics of having a learning disability or differentiating disabilities. Obviously, I scored 95 percentile in my reading comprehension. I don't need to be moved to remedial English. I just need some accommodations to level the playing field. And I think that was the issue, was not understanding. It's a leveling of the playing field. You're not giving me an advantage from everyone else. So that was where I really knew there was an issue, and kind of a crisis in private schools to some extent, of there's no understanding that you can be intelligent and have these learning disabilities, and that not everyone learns the same way. You can have successful students that come out of your prestigious school and go to prestigious colleges and have these amazing jobs in the future. They don't need to be all like the same learner person with no disabilities. Like, you can have a big variety of people and learning styles, and that's okay. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to advocate for others, because I could remain in this school and still succeed because I had Wellington, and I knew how to self-advocate. And I knew there were others who didn't have the privilege to go and receive therapy or even receive a diagnosis. It's pretty expensive to receive those. So there's plenty of people who aren't able to afford that and don't know how to self-advocate for themselves. So I knew that was something that I wanted to do, and to just show that it's not an intelligence issue at all. That was like the biggest thing. now I feel that currently the education system is just failing these students who don't learn the same way, and that having advocated and have conversations with people with disabilities over the last couple of years, that seems to be the consensus of if you don't learn this certain type of way, there's not really much we can do for you. And that's where I think we end up with people who hate school, drop out of school, don't really know where to go from here, end up with a lot of just emotional self-confidence issues, because you are sitting in this system, in this school that basically is teaching you, if you can't do it this way, you're not smart, you can't succeed. So that was a big part of my emotional just kind of breakdown of thinking I was stupid. And I got to this point of just wanting to figure out how to understand myself, because the education system and school around me was not teaching me how to understand myself and my learning style. And I came across a book, I'm sure someone recommended it to me, but I couldn't remember now who it was, but I will recommend it to everyone here, is The Dyslexic Advantage. I would say that's probably my favorite book. I would say that was the pivotal moment that shifted how I thought about myself and how I thought about education in general and thought about others with learning disabilities. This book takes the traits of dyslexia and explains them to you within like a neuroscience kind of understanding and terminology, and explains, where this is happening within your physiology of your brain, and shows you how it's not really a disability. There's a lot of abilities that come with a dyslexic brain. It's just within our system now, we see it as a disability, but that's just not true. So one of my favorite examples is the ability to see the big picture and just interweave a lot of details into a pretty big understanding and a pretty big theme. And this was always something that I was able to do so well. I still can do this very well. And one of the places that I really learned that I could do that was in my environmental science class in high school. I was able to take all these concepts that I had that were being presented and easily interweave them together and figure out the significance and be able to see it in my head in ways that my peers could not do. And so I was kind of the savant of this like class, because I understood, I could see it in my head. And so I got amazing scores on the test. I got a 5 on the AP test. I really excelled in that class because it was a skill and a ability that I had that everyone else there didn't have, because I'm dyslexic. Another example, if anyone has heard the game Corkle, I'm sure my family is laughing right now, but it's this game where you take blocks and they have a colored shape on there. And there's 6 shapes, 6 blocks. Basically, it's a pattern game. I highly recommend that one as well. My family and I, we play it anytime we're together, like multiple games in one evening. And so we've played it for a lot of times in my lifetime. And I could probably count on one hand how many times I've lost that game because of my ability to see patterns so quickly. My family is like, how are you doing? My family thinks I cheat. I don't cheat. And they're like, how do you do this? And it comes naturally to me. It's part of that dyslexic brain and being able to recognize those patterns. And that's where you get a lot of dyslexic people being so talented and successful in art, in being an entrepreneur and thinking outside the box, in all these different jobs and different ideas being expressed by people with dyslexia that other people just can't see. So really that's it. This has become my passion within life. I've taken something that was really difficult for me. I was kind of forced into being a self-advocate. And it was hard for me to do that. It was hard for me to be somewhat confrontational, especially with adults and teachers, especially when they told me they didn't think dyslexia was real. And I've kind of taken that and moved it into a direction that I feel like I'm helping society. I feel really passionate, and like this is my purpose in life, is helping students see that it's not just a disability. There's a lot of abilities that come with it, helping educators see that these students are intelligent and that they can be successful in your classes. There's just different ways to go about it. And so I've come into my kind of advocacy part of my life where in high school, I testified, and college, I testified in the Arizona Senate, like what was mentioned earlier. And that some of them required screening for dyslexia in kindergarten and education for Arizona teachers on dyslexia, and redefining dyslexia within Arizona public school systems, which was a really big fundamental first step for our education system. As well as I helped co-found the Arizona Catholic Schools Disability Fund, which was an organization in the Diocese of Phoenix that provided and still provides grants and resources for private schools, and having a better understanding of, you do have students in your schools with learning disabilities, and here's how you can support them. And I've taken on public speaking at various events, done some podcasts, and now I'm moving into my final piece of education, working for my master's in speech-language pathology, and I'll be attending ASU. So I have to say forks up for ASU people. I guess now I'm a Sun Devil. And so I've taken all this and I've made it into what I enjoy in life. And I think that is kind of the biggest lesson, is I took this thing that was a hindrance to me and what was a really hard struggle, and I've made it into something that I can be proud of and something that I can really make into a wonderful life for myself and for others. So my goal is to help others just understand that it's a gift, and just to kind of show that you can be successful with your dyslexia. I've graduated with honors from my high school, despite their disapproval for my standing out against just the treatment of people with learning disabilities there. I received academic scholarships at a lot of universities I applied to, and even where I am now here in Alabama. In college, I really got a cool experience of being at a public university and having that requirement of them to give me accommodations. I have a wonderful staff that's very helpful in the Office of Disability Services here. I'm able to have a testing center, my own room with extra time. I have note takers, like I said earlier, audio textbooks, minimal requirement for participation, which is really helpful with my reading out loud. That's like my worst fear still, is to read things out loud to people. I'm graduating summa cum laude next month, which is super exciting. I've had more semesters with a 4.0 than not, and I'm in 4 honor societies. This last year, I was president of my sorority, which is like a 400-member organization. We have like a $3 million budget and a 40,000 square foot facility. So it was a big job, but I was able to be successful in that, especially this last year with COVID, because of my ability to think outside the box and to see the big picture and really weave together details to get to being successful and pushing forward as an organization. So that's really kind of where I'm at now in my life, is I've kind of done a 180 of hating my dyslexia to it being my like favorite thing to tell people and what I love doing. So with that, I just would really love if anyone had questions. That's kind of my journey, but if there's anything I didn't touch on.
Kate, oh my goodness.
That's fantastic.
What a gift you just gave us. Every time I hear you speak, I'm always blown away. But seeing this next part of your life and how you pulled all of that together is just amazing. It was a gift for me as a dyslexia advocate and as a teacher of dyslexics. Just hearing you, I hope and pray that kids could listen to what you just said. So I know we're recording this, and parents who, like your mom, thought you were going to be living in the basement. That you look at you. I mean, I know your mom and dad are probably on this. So hi, Betsy and Ed. You should be so proud of her. I am. So my heart is so full right now. But yes, we want to open this up for questions, and there's a chat
Yes.
feature on your right of the screen. If you can start typing, if you have any questions, Beth, do you have any questions for Kate?
I have so many. So the first thing, when you were speaking about your experience with your Latin teacher and how he transitioned into the classroom and then flat out told you that dyslexia doesn't exist, my mouth like literally fell open. What did you say to him? Like, what was your response in that moment? Because I think that's such a powerful story.
I don't even remember. I think I kind of blacked out a little bit when that was told to me. I think I just said okay, and I like walked out because I didn't really know what else to say, especially when it's an adult talking to a child. I was a child at that point. I'm 14. I just was very blown away by that being his response to what I had just told him.
For sure. And then I know so many students, young students, adults, it doesn't even matter. It's across the board. People who are really nervous to be honest about what they need for their learning. How do you, and you did such a beautiful job sharing the story, but how did you bridge that gap? Like, how did you go from, having maybe some fears about going public with your teachers to actually becoming an advocate for yourself?
I think the biggest thing for me was reading the Dyslexic Advantage, that I've just hands down favorite book, because it changed how I viewed myself. Before, I didn't really have a ton of self-confidence, and I just thought I'm not very smart. I hate that I have to ask for these things. It's such a burden to everyone. And that book really shifted my perspective to being, no, I'm really smart, and I just do things differently, and I'm like pretty unique and cool. And that's kind of how I see myself. So having that just frame of mind approaching a teacher, I'm always really excited to talk to my teachers about my dyslexia during basically what I just told you. I would sit down and like tell a teacher if they'd listen for 40 minutes. Just being able to show them and tell them this is kind of where I've come from, what I'm really good at, what I need some help with. And usually they're pretty, especially in college, they're pretty understanding. And a lot of times it's maybe the first time they've heard from a student about what it's like being dyslexic. And so they end up having a lot of empathy and being able to like see where I'm at. And so I think it's easier for them to understand and give accommodations.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
What would you say, Kate, to a young dyslexic kiddo that maybe is starting intervention? And like you said, when you got in the car with your mom that first day after Wellington, you just started crying. Because I know for a lot of kiddos that are doing intervention, it's hard for them because they're getting pulled out of the classroom. They feel different. But is there any words of encouragement that you can share with students that are maybe going through that intervention process right now?
I would just say you're really cool and you're really unique, and it seems hard right now, but you end up coming at the grass is always greener on the other side, and it really is coming out of school, because I feel like I have the advantage now with my peers because I'm able to think in different ways that they can't always do. And so when you come out of school into college or into a professional school or just into a career, you're able to display your abilities, and it's really a cool experience to show that your brain is pretty neat.
Well, I think that's hard for kids too to understand, because typically the way kids are taught to read in school isn't the way a dyslexic brain needs to learn how to read, right? So we're not wired to read, we're wired to speak. So I think if any, those kids just know that there's nothing wrong with them, they just need to be taught a different way. So that's great. That's great. And what about your parents? Because man, they must have been so supportive of you, because you have such a your self-esteem is wonderful, but it sounds like you really struggled when you were a kid with your self-esteem, because you're very bright, but it wasn't always coming through, and your teachers maybe didn't see really how smart you really are.
I think my parents are so supportive of me. They really are always in my ring, like willing to basically fight for me if I ever needed it. My mom will come out swinging if anyone can tell me I'm not smart. So just having them there and just always telling me, like, you're really smart. You have these really great abilities, and some people just can't see it. And oh, what a shame, like, that they're not able to see that. Just being told that over and over. And even, there are times now where I have doubts in my ability. I was denied from a graduate school this last month, and I had doubts in me being smart. I still can come back into those places where my jump reaction is, oh my gosh, it's because I'm not smart. And just having them there being like, no, like, are you listening to yourself? Like, look at all the amazing things you've done. Look at what you can do. That you are very intelligent. Just always having them there to tell me that and to be supportive of me is really been a game changer.
Right. Did you have to take the MCAT? What kind of entrance test or did you have to do for grad school?
I had to take the GRE.
Okay.
And I did get extra time.
You did? Okay.
The GRE. For the SAT, though, going into college, I was denied extra time, actually. They told me my grades were too high, even though I have a full diagnosis, and I'm pretty unbelievable. So I took the ACT because they gave me extra time, but the SAT denied me. So.
Wow. And so did you go through the college board? You obviously had to go through the college board,
yes.
Right? And they denied you.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. But for the GRE, you got extra time.
The GRE, I got extra time, and I had a wonderful tutor who tutored me for the ACT and the GRE, Bob Pimentel. I love him to death. It was so understanding of, and he was so excited to learn about my dyslexia and what I needed that would be different. So working with him was an amazing experience. And I did really well on the GRE the first time around. I didn't even have to take it again. So that's just another kind of example of when the educators and teachers are willing to learn and willing to just be flexible with how they're teaching. The student can come out being just so successful.
Right. Did you, when you were in high school and you were trying to advocate for yourself, did you meet any other students that were dyslexic as well in your high school? Because they're there, because it's 1 in 5, right? That's what the statistic is.
There were some students, but I was definitely the most vocal. There was kind of a fear of saying you had a learning disability, and it was just kind of known that you'd be treated differently, and that there wasn't really going to be any benefit if you said. So now I know of some people who did have learning disabilities, but just didn't tell the school because there just wasn't really going to be anything given. So it was, okay, well, I'll just figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
Right.
We did have a question from an audience member, Leslie, who asked if the Wellington Center taught any of the advocacy skills that you were able to use, or if there are ways of helping you incorporated advocacy at all.
I could not speak more highly of Wellington. They really are kind of the reason I'm here today, and I've gone back and I've worked there in college as well. I think throughout the whole program, the staff there, it's a very family feeling. It's very comforting being there, and I don't know that there was ever like a sit down and this is how you advocate for yourself, but it was like through the therapy and just spending the days there, you learned that you're not stupid. You're very smart. This is what you're really great at, and this is where we can help you and what is going to make it easier for you in school. So you kind of learn those techniques and different strategies on how to be a self-advocate, just kind of like through osmosis of being there a little bit. And Stacy, who is the lead SLP there, has always been in my corner. And she would come into high school, and she actually met with the Latin teacher as well, who thought dyslexia was with my parents.
Gosh,
so
awesome.
Yeah, but she was always there to just be an advocate for me when my self-advocacy wasn't enough. But they did teach me how to advocate for myself pretty well.
I love that.
Do we have any other questions, Beth? That you can see?
That was the first one that I popped up.
Does anybody else out there want to ask a question? You can type it in the chat.
So you had mentioned to us before we went live that this is something that multiple people in your family have now experienced. And I know that our family can definitely relate to that. But even still, like with our journey, there were so many questions about what was happening and what we should do about it. Do you think that your journey helped other people in your family then get a diagnosis? Or did you learn about that maybe after you already went through your experience and then started talking about it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think my diagnosis, opened the floodgates. Diagnosis. We kind of laugh that it should be like buy 3, get 1 free at family members that come through now. But definitely, I think my parents were a little bit more aware. They knew the signs. So when my younger brother was diagnosed, it was easier for that diagnosis to come through, and he went to Wellington, and that was a quick turnaround. He was younger. So I think my family has benefited. Like a lot of my relatives have been able to get therapy sooner. And obviously now that this is my major and what I want to do in my career, I have a better understanding of how everything works. So I'm able to kind of help everyone along with figuring out accommodations. Where do we go from here? What do we need to do? I'm kind of the in-house SLP until I'm officially in my family.
I love that.
That's so great. Anybody else have any questions?
I don't see anything yet. Hasn't already been answered.
You know what we can do also right now is we have a couple giveaways also. So we're going to do some raffles. Go ahead, Beth.
I would say we've got a T-shirt, and we also have a Starbucks gift card. So let's first do. We'll do the 4th person to write your name in the chat feature, and so that will be the first giveaway this morning. Rachel doesn't count. Rachel just said. Here we go. We've got one. And then in the meantime, I wanted to ask how you feel all of your experiences will help you in the future with your career. I wrote about this for my personal statement for graduate school. I think it's what's going to set me apart from a lot of other people in my field. I feel as though I just have the complete understanding of administering therapy and being a client, because I've been on the other side of the table, quite literally getting the therapy. So just having that understanding of the emotional journey, what it's like to be the individual, what you're thinking. And it's just offered me, the experience has given me a lot of benefits going through college and being in this major. We've had, some practice like administering tests, and I'm like, I've seen this test. I've done it, 4 times for each diagnosis work thing that I need done. But just having that, I think the biggest thing, having the understanding of the emotional journey and what it's like to be a person living with dyslexia day to day is probably the biggest thing that's going to help me in my field and in my career. Yeah, that's so true. That's going to be such
inspiring.
a gift.
Inspiring, Kate.
So if
You
I'm
are a
reading this,
gift. You are a gift.
if I'm reading this correctly, 1, 2, 3, 4, Lori Martin. Is that correct? So Lori Martin. And
Yay,
we will have
Lori.
you email. Mary's going to give me the email. Hopefully, we're going to have you email Arizona IDA. And that way we can connect with you and send you your t-shirt. So let's do one more. What should we do, Heather? Should we do just the first person? First person to write your name?
Person. I like that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. First person to write your name we'll do after. There we go. Thanks, Mary. So info@arizonaida.org is who you will contact. And now right after that, the first person to write your name in the chat, we will send a Starbucks gift card to. So we'll give you a second to do that.
And then while you do that, I'm going to share my screen.
And here's another, I think, question too.
Oh, we have a question?
Yeah, let me double check
and
make sure that we've got everything. So there's one question from Gail. In addition to learning better advocacy skills, did you work on morphology for vocabulary was the question.
Yes, I did. And boy, did that help me for the GRE. Because the GRE is a lot of vocabulary, and I had that skill. I actually still, at Wellington, you get a toolbox, like a binder with just kind of all these worksheets that kind of summarize what you did. And I still have it. I have it in my apartment here in Alabama with me. I brought it with me to college because every now and then I will go back and look at it. So the morphology was a big help with vocabulary. That really, especially going into a science major too, was great.
Right. And I believe in the Wellington intervention is evidence-based, and it hits all those 5 components. So, and that's really important for those dyslexic students, that they're getting evidence-based intervention, and what Kate got. And it obviously made a huge difference and helped change her trajectory. So any other questions?
Yeah, so Rachel actually has a question. And it was, do you have any suggestions for kids on how to take those first steps when reaching out to teachers? Any advice for young students as they're trying to learn those advocacy skills and build that skill base?
I think probably the most important thing is having a conversation as a family beforehand, and just kind of going over. One thing that I didn't touch on was having a diagnosis was really important for me, because I had an understanding of why I was doing certain things or why I wasn't doing certain things.
So true.
I think having a conversation, regardless of the age, is really important in understanding, this is, you're dyslexic, this is what this means. Here's where you really succeed. Here's where, you need some extra help. And these are the things that can help you get to, whatever level that you want to be at. And having that conversation, and pretty often, like within the family unit, I think is super important, because then the child is able to more freely and more openly have a conversation with anyone else about their diagnosis and having dyslexia. And it makes it a lot easier to approach the teacher when you have conversations often and just explain, this is me. This is what I need to be a successful student, which that's a teacher's job, is to make you a successful student. So having that is a big thing, I think.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's see if there's any questions in the meantime. The first person to actually put their name in right after for that was Gail Walsh.
Okay, congratulations, Gail. Awesome.
And then I think, let me just double check, but it says, what age would you recommend a child to read The Dyslexic Advantage? Because it's a great book, but it may be, it might be a little bit much for a younger student. What do you think?
I think, I'm trying to remember when I read that. It must have been 8th grade, maybe beginning of high school that I read that book. But I think as a parent, reading the book and then, like I was saying, having a conversation, and so you're able to pull in those kind of main themes from the book into the conversation with the child, is a good idea, because then they kind of get the understanding and the ideas of the book without actually having to read a book that's heavy in like neuroscience and explaining stuff.
Right. And I listened to that one. There's a lot there. So that was a great one to have
an audio version.
Just a little tip. And let's see if there's anything else. Would you recommend reading it together? So you kind of already addressed that. She has a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old, 2 boys who were recently diagnosed. And so that's where that question's coming from. So that's awesome. I think that's perfect to have that in your back pocket and have those great conversations.
Absolutely.
Right. Anything else, audience, that we need to not address? I want to make sure that I didn't miss any questions. So if there's something that we haven't had answered yet or haven't asked yet, go ahead and pop that back in so it maybe refreshes. But in the meantime, do you want to share the...
Yeah, for our next coffee chat. Let me share my screen with you. Can you all see that?
Yeah. Well, I can.
So first of all, I have to say thank you again for Kate for spending the morning with us and sharing her journey. And I feel really blessed to know you, Kate, and to know that I know you're going to be a change maker and you're going to make a big difference in so many students' lives. And I'm proud that you're a native Arizonan too, and you're coming back to the state. So we really need more people like you, speaking on behalf of all those dyslexics that are out there. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us today. And Beth, do you want to say anything else to Kate before we talk about our next chat?
I am just absolutely blown away by your story. I think you have such an experience, but a way of explaining your experience that is warm, and you're such a great, public speaker that I just think so many people will be able to benefit from hearing your story. And I'm so excited that you're coming back to Arizona. Because that's only going to help to benefit our state. We actually had a couple of questions that came in towards the end. And one kind of speaks to that is, what can we do as a community to allow more students to get a diagnosis, since it is so expensive? So when you go to the private side, many of us families realize just how expensive this can be. What are your thoughts on how we can reach those who maybe don't have that in the budget?
I think the biggest thing is really lobbying in just our state legislation. I do believe that is something the education system needs to provide, because it is 1 in 5. It's 20% of the kids going through the public education system. So it's super important to have those resources there. So just being active in just kind of the lobbying of legislation and making sure it's a requirement that there's screening available. Because if you catch it at such a young age, there's not much therapy time that needs to be, it's not as much as in my case, when I'm in 7th grade and I have to make up for all the time. So when you're younger, you're cutting down your costs and really the time that it takes to provide the therapy and the necessary skill sets for someone with a learning difference to accurately and better read. So it really goes down to the legislation and making our education system provide resources for us dyslexic kids.
Yeah, and having teachers, and like you said, Kate, teachers having the understanding of, what signs to look for, and then also, teaching phonics and structured literacy in the classroom, and having that as it must be. Structured literacy must be taught in every classroom, and at least in K through 3. And then also, if those kids aren't meeting those benchmarks, then they're going to get tested in the public school system, and then we can identify them and get them intervention. And the interventionists need to be trained.
Yes,
they need to be trained, and they don't. Even reading specialists don't know how to work with dyslexic students. Not all reading specialists, but you're just not taught in school, in the teacher ed prep programs, how to teach reading. And it really is, it's a science. and it is rocket science, and that's what, Dr. Moat said. So anyhow, but there's a lot we can do, and our board here, we, our association, a branch here in Arizona, that's what we're trying to do. Come and join. Check out our website. Check out our social media, because we are working hard on advocating for all those kiddos out there in Arizona. But Kate, you are a shining star, and I know you have already made a big difference. So
thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story today.
Oh, we're so grateful. And with all that, I mean, that's a great segue into what our next chat is going to be about. We're having a school psychologist here, Karina Greenwald, next month to talk about screening and testing and interventions in the public school system. So that'll be another wonderful chat. We don't have the exact date, but look towards the end of April. Check our website, check our social media for that date. We should be nailing that down in the next week or so. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kate. Again, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you guys.
Thank you to everyone that came.
Okay, everybody, enjoy your weekend. Stay safe out there.